Hey everybody, so today I thought that I would do a dialysis update for you all and let you know how this past week has gone and share the experiences that I've had. It was a different week than I've had before in terms of up and downs, and just different days were completely different from each other. So Monday we had a lot of blood pressure problems. For reference, before my kidney disease and transplant and all of this dialysis, growing up and everything, my blood pressure was always on the normal to low normal side. So it would run about 105, 110 over 70. Immediately after my transplant, it was completely normal. And it happens in a lot of cases where your blood pressure just runs super, super low. So when I discharged from the hospital from my transplant, they, advised me to keep salt on me at all times, or if I had to stop, at a restaurant or whatever, to eat some salt if I could feel myself getting dizzy or lightheaded because my blood pressure was dropping. It was smart to do that. I think on the way home from the hospital, we stopped at the grocery store, and luckily it was one of the grocery stores that has a restaurant in it, because my blood pressure just tanked and I had to sit down and put like a packet of salt in my hand and just lick it. Do not recommend it. They also suggested things like having bouillon cubes at home or buying ramen soup and just having the packets. After years on a sodium restricted diet before you have your kidney transplant and then being told eat salt plain, it just seems like a foreign world. But eventually my blood pressure got better. And then when my kidney started failing again and now is in failure, my blood pressure slowly crept up. And as dialysis has started and started to clear out the toxins and do all that for me, my blood pressure started to come back down to my relative normal. But during dialysis sessions themselves, my blood pressure tanks again. And I'm pretty sure a couple of videos of dialysis ago, I talked about the techs were working on the right rate to do my dialyzing machine. So instead of being at one level rate the whole 3 hours and 15 minutes that I'm on the chair, we do it kind of like an up and down like this. So if it goes up and then it goes down just based on where my blood pressure is. So if my blood pressure starts to creep down, then it knows to kind of slow down the rate. And then as my blood pressure normalizes, it goes back up. So Monday, about the halfway through, my blood pressure started tanking and it wouldn't come back up. So the machine itself, it stopped dialyzing for a chunk of time before restarting, and my blood pressure recovered, and then we finished. I didn't feel great, but I didn't feel terrible. After we unhooked the machine, however, and they do the sitting blood pressure, and then they have to do a standing one. My sitting one was great. My standing one, it dropped down to about 80 over 60. Not too terrible, but they don't really like to let you leave, especially if you're driving like I do, with your blood pressure not over 100 on the top number. So 25 minutes later, it still hasn't risen, and now it's down to 75 over 45. So we take some of this medication they have that's supposed to help your blood pressure come up. I can't remember the name of it. I will look it up and put it in the description box. It starts with an M. It reminds me of melatonin, and it's not, but I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head. But you're supposed to take that and wait about 20-25 minutes, and it should raise your blood pressure. No dice. 25 minutes later, my blood pressure was about 60 over 40. And so then they decide that they're going to bolus me some fluid, because the fluid raises your blood pressure, which in hindsight makes sense, because before I was on dialysis and my blood pressure was getting higher and higher than typical, my body wasn't flushing out the toxins or getting rid of the water. And so now, since dialysis has taken all the water out, if they put some more fluids in me, it's gonna raise the blood pressure, right? So they did that, and my sitting blood pressure was great right away. But the standing one, just to end this story, I was there, I get there at about 11:30, and my chair time is 3 hours and 15 minutes. So technically, if everything went according to plan, I would be off the machine by 3 o'clock, because that gives the room to hook me up to the machine and also take me off the machine. That day, I was there until almost 5 o'clock because my blood pressure wouldn't come up. It was frustrating, is probably the best word I can use to describe what it felt like. I wasn't frustrated with the techs. I wasn't frustrated with dialysis itself. It's just, it's not even that small of a clinic or anything, but and I'm not a claustrophobic person, but I just felt like I was suffocating. Like I just wanted to leave. But finally it got to like 95 as the top number. And I was like, listen, when I leave here, I typically go and sit in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just kind of gathering my thoughts and just sitting back and relaxing for a little bit before I, drive the mile back to my apartment. So they let me go. And I was fine. I sat in the parking lot and I called Joel, and then I sat, and then I talked to one of my sisters, and then I drove home, and it was fine. And the rest of the night I felt fine. It's just, that was the first time I've had to stay that long because of low blood pressure. And that was Monday. Then Wednesday, no blood pressure problems. And that was great. The thing that happened on Wednesday is that my graft got infiltrated. So that means that the needle that goes in, one of the needles that goes into the graft, it gets kind of dislodged, or it's not inserted correctly, and some of the blood leaks into the tissue that surrounds the graft. And so it causes pain and swelling, and it can lead to infection. And that happened on Wednesday. When the tech was putting the needle in, they're down, they ladder it on the graft, so they never go in the same place twice, which is good because that builds scar tissue. But they've moved down so much on one side that it got to where the curve is in the graft, and it's a little tricky, I think, to get it to go around that, and it didn't quite go in smoothly. And I think that's where the mishap started. Right away, it didn't quite feel right, but I mean, it never is really all that comfortable, so I didn't think about it too much. About 2 hours, 15 minutes in, like, my arm is really, really starting to hurt. And I kind of, you have to keep it like visible enough that they can see the lines coming from your arm, but I kind of cover up like my lower arm and my upper arm, so it's kind of wrapped a little bit. So I didn't really look at it during the whole session. But when I looked over at it, it was swelling up. It was warm to the touch, and it just hurt. It didn't hurt. Like, it wasn't an intolerable pain, but it was definitely there. So the nurse came over and the tech came over, and they looked at it, and they asked if I wanted to stop my session, which would be understandable. It was painful, but I decided, you know what, I have less than an hour to go. I'm not physically feeling sick or lightheaded or nausea or anything like that. This just hurts. But if it's not actually, blowing up, I'd like to continue so we can get as much fluid off as possible, because I had not gotten all the fluid off on Monday because it had been turned off for a little bit during my session. So Wednesday, I soldiered through until the end. And after we were done with the machine, and they turned off the machine to get ready to loosen my arm, they did tell me that, part of my session, the machine was also turned off because my blood pressure fell below 100. So it was off 20 minutes. So even though I stayed on the whole time, technically I didn't because of that, and I did not get all the fluid off again on Wednesday. But the bigger part is that they took the needles out of my arm, and I'm not going to show it because I don't want to, some people might be really like queasy looking at something that is like this on your arm, and it doesn't look terrible now. But on Wednesday I had to, ice it and then unice it and then ice it and unice it. And then the next day on Thursday I did ice and heat just to help it because it hurt a lot. We took some Tylenol that night to alleviate the pain, and it just sucked. And I don't feel like it really had to happen, but I also can't be irritated at the person who did it because it is a difficult spot on my graft to do, and it's not like they meant for this to happen. I was a little frustrated as I was talking to her about it because she kind of gave different reasons why this could happen. And at the end, she kind of owned up the fact, like, it could have been that I didn't insert it around the curve right. So I'm sorry for that. Which, like I said, I wasn't upset with her or anything. I thought it was big of her to own that, because I knew that's why it happened. It happened because at the beginning, she had misguided it and poked wrong. But I wasn't gonna call her out about it, because I wouldn't do that. But I really appreciated that she said that, and it's not even like I appreciate her apology. She didn't need to apologize, but I do appreciate that she said that I don't want to say it made me feel better, but it made me appreciate her more for her willingness to say that, because I know that probably wasn't easy to say either. So that really sucked. And for Wednesday and Thursday, it was like, back when I got the graft placed and I had talked about how I couldn't really straighten my arm. It was like my arm was in an invisible sling, and that's kind of how I had to walk the rest of Wednesday and Thursday, just because it hurt to straighten the arm, like burning, hurting. So then we got to Friday today, and when I went in, I showed the nurse what it looked like, and it was still kind of warm to the touch. She examined it to make sure that it didn't seem like it was infected, which it doesn't seem like it's infected, it's just irritated. So we didn't use the bottom part of my graft today. We did both needles at top of the graft, which I was a little nervous about, because that's closer to each other than they typically are, but it went fine. So that part was fine. We had a little bit of a low blood pressure problem at the end of my session, but the whole session today, thankfully, I felt perfectly fine. And we were able to take off a little bit more than I put on in, the rest of Wednesday and Thursday before I came back today. So I'll try to explain this in an understandable way, because sometimes I still get a little confused about it. But each day that you're gone from dialysis, you typically tend to put on fluid, like toxic fluid, in your body. And that's what the dialysis does to remove it. And they like to set a dry weight for you. And what you gain above your dry weight is what they try to take off during dialysis. So let's say your dry weight, I'm just going to put out there, let's say your dry weight is 120 pounds. We do kilograms, but I'm not going to do kilograms because whatever. 120 pounds. And so let's say you come in, that's on a Monday, and you leave at your dry weight of 120 pounds. And then Wednesday you come in and you're 124.5 pounds. So they're going to want to take off 4.5 pounds of fluid. So for me today, when I went in, I had put on about 1.9 kilograms of fluid between Wednesday afternoon and Friday morning. But because it's the weekend and I won't have dialysis on Saturday or Sunday, they typically like to try to take a little bit more off, just to give you a little bit more wiggle room. And also, I was still kind of having some fluid left over from the Monday and Wednesday that I hadn't quite been able to take off. So today we decided to try to aim for 2.3 kilograms. And so at the end, we ended up getting about 2.2 kilograms off, which was right under what we wanted with the extra, but it was over the minimum that I could have gotten. So it was a really good day. And the thing that's really nice about that is that I didn't feel sick at all. Because sometimes when they over pull a little bit, it's pulling too much. And that's one of the reasons why I'll get cramps, like muscle cramps and aches, or the really bad headache and the nausea and just the feeling of awfulness where I have to stop it early. But today that didn't happen, and it was really nice. So I was able to get out of there by 3:10 because we had a little bit of the blood pressure issue, but it was an easy Friday, thankfully. So that just leads into good for the weekend. Yeah, so it's just like, I never know what to expect when I'm going in there for my session. I never know if it's going to be good or bad, because sometimes I'll wake up and I'll feel kind of crappy, but I'm fine during my session. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'll feel pretty good and I go, and then the rest of the day is just lost because it zaps me of any energy that I had. So it's kind of frustrating that I can't really know how it is. I feel like since talking on here these past few months, usually I'm more talking about feeling badly after my dialysis sessions, because I think that's kind of been more of my experience. But I'm trying to keep the optimism that the longer that I stick to it and the more they know me and the more my body gets used to this process, it's going to start to weigh more in on the feeling good part than the feeling bad part. So here's to starting the weekend off feeling pretty dried out and hoping that by Monday I have another good session. So I think that's about all that I need to say about for today. I thank you guys all for sticking with me and watching this, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you